Okay, should be live any second. Okay, we are live. So good evening, everybody here in the UK. Thank you for joining me once again. Alex Chisnell here at the Festival of Startups. Hope you enjoyed the previous session with Enterprise Nation. I'm joined by Brendan Kane, who's in, I'm assuming you're in LA. I know you're in California, Brendan. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm in LA at the minute.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for joining us for today's session. So Brendan is renowned as an outside-the-box thinker, digital strategist and growth hacker who's built online platforms for A-listers, including Taylor Swift, Rhianna, and advised brands from MTV to IKEA on how to establish and grow their digital strategies and engagement. He's also a best-selling author whose latest book is called Hook Point, How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to connect with you and everybody else that's watching.
Thank you. So I spoke to you last probably a couple of years ago now, Brendan, when your first book, 1 Million Followers, came out. How long did it take you to come up with the idea for the second book, and how long to actually write it? What was the process like for you?
So the process was actually a lot longer. 1 Million Followers we wrote in probably 3 months. Hook Point took about 2 years.
Wow.
From start to finish. And in terms of when I came up with it or how long it took, I honestly don't remember. I think it was probably over a few months' time. I mean, generally these things come to me and then I'll move on it pretty quick. So I may have, I mean, it probably came in just like a moment's notice, and then I would explore and always do my research and kind of test with my inner circle and circle of experts and people really successful to seed the idea to them, to see what their response is. And then from there, I'll make a decision whether it's worth the time and financial investment to go off and do it.
Yeah. And it was interesting. I was speaking to Mark Victor Hansen from, Chicken Soup for the Soul, 1 Minute Millionaire, those kind of books. And he was saying that, he'd normally combine his love of travel with his love of writing. He's pretty prolific, obviously, and would literally target a continent and go away for, 3 months and tour and do book launches. And simply because of what's happened in the pandemic, he's discovered podcasts for the first time in his life. He's discovered live webinars for the first time, and he's done, a virtual book tour. How did you go about getting your word out about your book to your audience? Obviously social media, but did you look to leverage anything else?
So we spent about 2 years building an engine and an infrastructure to be able to promote our books at scale and to do it in a sustainable way. So for example, like 1 Million Followers, we sell more books today than we did when we launched. So most people, when they're focusing on books, they're focused on just like that initial launch. Yeah. And now the long-term strategy is where we don't really focus on the launch at all and focus on what is the long-term, engine that can keep it running and keep pumping as many copies into the marketplace as possible. And that's really highly dependent on social advertising, Amazon advertising, and then we do podcasts as well. But I would say most of the awareness and the books that we sell comes from social media advertising.
Yeah, interesting. And how have you, communication has clearly changed since the advent of social media, but what changes have you seen just in the last 6, 7, 8, 9 months, maybe, since the pandemic's hit, with regards to how people communicate with each other in the world? Because everybody's been at home for longer, everybody's been online for a longer length of time, kids have been off from school. What kind of trends have you noticed?
Well, we've seen, as soon as COVID hit, we saw a huge uptake in social media in terms of posts, comments, interactivity. In addition, we saw a pretty big spike in just negativity around social media and communication, primarily because people are locked in their homes. They're dealing with tremendous stress of being isolated, or that their business or their personal life is impacted in a pretty substantial way, as we all have experienced, that the world has really changed over the past 7 months. So I would say those are really the two things, is just uptick in activity just in general, and also more negativity and kind of, stranger and harsher comments as people are isolating themselves, and the mental impact of it.
Yeah, it seems to me it's a very reactive space to be in, isn't it? And I think, we've seen it from afar over here, looking at the US election, for example, and how, reactive that seems, and how harsh an environment that seems as well. And I'm sure it's very different from you living over there, and, seeing and hearing the different TV, radio channels that you'd see.
Yeah, definitely.
And for those entrepreneurs who are just starting out, starting out, it can almost appear an impossible task to stand out from the noise and the competition that's already out there. And from your point of view, for those people at the relative beginning of that journey, or the first couple of years, what are some of the tools that you use, that you recommend that people should be focusing on when it comes to building a social media presence, when it comes to marketing their brands?
Well, at the end of the day, no matter whether you're using social media ads or offline, you've got to really determine what separates you from everybody else, what makes you unique, what makes you different. Now, that's very simple to say, but not necessarily easy to pull off. So if you're just starting out, it's a little bit more difficult than if you've been in business for quite some time. Like if you're just starting out, you've really got to take a step back and just listen and learn as much as possible. Listen, who do you want to attract? What are the type of clients? What are the type of jobs? Who do you want to partner with? And then really listen to them and see what are the biggest challenges they're facing, what are their biggest pain points that they're facing, and how can you be a solution to those, either directly or indirectly. Directly meaning you do something for them to overcome that challenge or obstacle, or indirectly you bring something to them to overcome that challenge or obstacle. And it's the same kind of philosophy when we're dealing with an established business. Is the first place I always like to start is, who is your core audience that you're trying to attract, or your core consumer, and what is keeping them up at night? And from that, we can learn a lot about how we specifically message, how we specifically create content or position ourselves in the marketplace. Another big element that I think people go wrong in terms of differentiating yourselves is from a psychological perspective and a human behavioral perspective, there's a big difference between what people want and what people need. So oftentimes when we have a business, a product or service, we're so entrenched in it because we've been doing it so long, we know so much about it, we take for granted everything that we know about it, and we know the audience needs this, but the audience may not be there in terms of their perspective of their challenge or their problems. So you've really got to distinguish the difference between what people are searching for, i.e., what do they really want, versus what do they really need, which may be different than what they're searching for. So for example, with my first book, 1 Million Followers, I played the title and the hook off of what people want. People want followers. They want social media growth. But I know what they need is they need to have the right mindset. They need to know how to test. They need to know how to create shareable content. They need to know the importance of strategic alliances and partnerships. However, if I would have led with any of those things, and said the art of A/B testing for social platforms, or the art of creating shareable content, or how to create strategic alliances on digital platforms, it's not going to attract the audience at scale that we were able to do with 1 million followers. Yeah. That's not to say that we're baiting and switching or doing clickbait. We talk about follower growth, but what we really do is we hook them in with what they want so that we can deliver them what they really need if they want to grow a social audience, if they want to engage them. And I see that a lot of people, when they're looking for ways to stand out, they oftentimes miss that point. and it makes it harder for them to really get people to stop and pay attention to who they are and what they have to say.
And what was what remind me what date, because that's the last time we spoke, remind me, what date did the 1 million followers come out? What date did you publish that first in the US?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you. I think it's 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
This is 2 years ago.
Updated it like 3 times since then.
And do you still get regular feedback from people, I'm assuming, because if you're selling more books now than you did?
Yeah, I mean, we're selling more books than we had when we first launched. So we get feedback every day.
Yeah. And a couple of questions that are already flying in. Any specific differences in how you would approach social following and building a social following for B2B or B2C?
Yes. First off, if you're a B2B business, why do you need a social following? Like I've built many successful B2B businesses, and to me, B2B business, my first line of thinking is, okay, who is the exact clientele? What is their makeup? What is their job title? What companies they work for? And then I'm going straight to LinkedIn, connecting, creating cadences, extracting emails, putting it in automated CRMs, and just going after deal flow and deals. Yes, you can attract B2B clients with an organic social following, but I would use that as kind of like phase 2 or phase 3. There's a lot of clients that I'll work with that I say, well, let's not focus on social followers right now. Let's just focus on revenue. Let's focus on leads. Let's focus on sales. And then through that, we can then reinvest into a social following. So from a B2B business standpoint, just go after the deals, go after the deal flows, connect directly with the decision makers, A/B test your messaging either through LinkedIn messages or extracting that, again, those leads into a CRM and then A/B test the automated email cadences that you push out.
I think that's great advice for anybody to start with, especially to go after the revenue and then focus afterwards on different strategies. But for those starting out, I mean, it's oxygen, isn't it, for any business? So it's a great question. And another one coming from Rish, who says, in terms of standing out in a world of short attention spans, is part of the key just queuing up a lot of content on social media, hopefully attracting attention, extending reach, and giving the existing audience more content to keep them happy?
No, I would say the absolute opposite.
Yeah,
there's so much information about consistency and frequency, and we take the exact opposite approach. We are quality over quantity, because and I don't know how many of you guys saw The Social Dilemma, but it's a perfect analogy of what really controls your ability to be successful or not, and that's the algorithms. And the algorithms have one job and one job only, and that's to keep people on the platform longer. And to keep people on the platform longer, they're going to prioritize content that retains audiences. So if you're just posting blindly and just continuously just post more and more content and hope that something takes off, you're essentially training the algorithms that you're not a content creator that builds retention. Versus if you focus just heavily on each piece of content and how you can make that content the best at possible of first getting somebody to stop in their feed, and secondarily spend more time with that content, that's where you ultimately have success. And most people fail the other approach because they're just cranking out content for the sake of cranking out content. They're not learning. They're not experimenting. They're not growing as a content creator. And really, there's only 2 things you need to do to be successful on social media. It's very simple, is get somebody to stop on your feed. And then number 2, once you have them stopped, hold their attention for as long as possible. Now, those 2 steps are very simple, but it's not necessarily easy to pull off. But that's really the focus if you really want to stand out and garner the attention that you're looking for.
And you mentioned that in your book. Obviously, it takes less than 3 seconds to capture somebody's attention. How do you get somebody to literally stop scrolling on their phone and actually hook them into your feed, and, as you say, get to actually spend time reading a message and finding out more about the person or the brand?
Well, there's many different tools that and ways that you can go about it. First and foremost, you've got to look at it from the standpoint of generating a pattern interruption. So the thing that people lose sight of is you're living in a world now where you're competing against every piece of content. You're no longer just competing against your direct competition. Like it or not, you're competing against Netflix, you're competing against LeBron James, Kim Kardashian, The Rock, all these people. So you've got to look at it from the standpoint of no matter what platform, just use this analogy, as somebody just opens up and they're just scrolling through Instagram and they just watch LeBron James dunk, they just watch Kevin Hart tell a joke, they just watch a Netflix trailer. Well, what's going to be that interrupter that's going to get somebody to stop after they've just watched all of that content? And there's different ways and tools that you can go about it. One such tool is subverting expectations, is like flipping it on its head. So, for example, we had a social video that did really well where the meme card or the headline said, "Warning," in all capitalizations, exclamation points, "Safety is dangerous." So we flipped that misconception or that conception in the head that safety is the way to be safe, but we said safety is dangerous, to flip it on its head. There's another video that we did that played off the old saying that don't sweat the small stuff. So we did a different version of it that said sweat the small stuff. So we subverted expectations to create that pattern interruption, really to first get people to stop and then get into the message that we want to share. Now, most people miss that part. Yeah. They try and go straight to the message, straight to the product, straight to the service, and essentially overwhelm people with too much information. And if people get overwhelmed, they're just going to scroll past and keep moving and keep going.
Yeah. And how I totally get that, and I think I'm one of the worst people at doing that as well. You literally just write the main body of the content, but you don't actually get anybody to stop and actually read that. For like SME, small, medium-sized businesses, people at the early stage of the journeys, would you recommend somebody doing, like employing a copywriter, studying, testing yourself, or all of those things?
Well, I think I always recommend learn as much as possible, because even if you hire somebody and you don't really understand how it works, then it's going to be really hard to determine whether they're doing a good job or how to manage them. So, I mean, some of the tools we do is pay attention to what makes you stop. What books do you buy? What magazines do you pick up? What TV shows do you read? What social posts do you share? And each time you do that, stop and understand what was it about it that captured your attention. And the same, if something doesn't capture your attention, is analyze that. And for the things that do, is start playing around with, well, how could I take that headline, that book title, and plug in my product or service or my message? And so that's one way of doing it, and just constantly testing and iterating and getting better at it. I mean, we've been doing this for 15 years, so we have a very good handle on what works and what doesn't. So you've got to at least start someplace, and that's where I like to start. Is like, if you're just getting into it and you're finding yourself struggling with it, is just analyze the market of what works and what doesn't work, and then figure out how you can learn from those to create your next hook, your next way to stand out, and just repeat that process over and over again.
And for you, when you see different companies bringing out, for example, like LinkedIn bringing out stories, you've got Reels being brought out by Instagram. Are you personally, you and your team, are you like early adopters of that technology, or is it something that's only relevant if your audience is going to be using those kind of tools as well?
Typically, we're late. I like to be late and watch other people do it and see what they do, what works, what doesn't work, and to see if it holds up before we dive into it. Because there's oftentimes where these features will come out and fail. And I'm not suggesting that any of those ones you met are falling into that bucket, but they'll fail and then they'll be deprioritized in the algorithms. And then essentially you've kind of spent so much energy and time figuring out something that ultimately isn't working. Now, is there an advantage, first mover advantage? Yeah, absolutely. But I prefer to sit back and play the long game instead of kind of the short way of the latest craze or technology.
And where do you see but you see something like Spotify spending, hundreds of millions of dollars, be that a Joe Rogan or, Kim Kardashian show, or buying Anchor, a platform. And clearly, as you said rightly beforehand, that they simply want people to spend longer on their platform, rather than, if they just had music, people be shooting off to Apple to listen to that. Where do you think their ultimate long game is, where their players with that, where they will eventually take that?
Spotify specifically?
Yeah, or the podcasting world in general. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Spotify is playing the Netflix game. Is they've seen what Netflix has done in terms of original content, and that's really their defensible model. I was just baffled at the number of people that said Netflix is dead when Disney Plus announced or HBO Max announced. And they don't get it, because the original content is what hooks people in and keeps people around. Yeah. It's like Netflix is not going to die until they stop making Stranger Things or the next Stranger Things. And that's what Spotify sees the writing on the wall, is podcasting or just their platform and business model is not just a platform. It's like, what is the original IP? What is the original content that we can bring in to keep people around? And that's where they're justifying that. And whatever the real number is that they pay Joe Rogan is, okay, with Joe Rogan's audience, can we migrate that over to Spotify and make it the exclusive distribution partner? Now, with that said, there's many companies that have tried to do this in the past and have failed miserably. Rever was one of the earliest ones when they competed against YouTube. There was a company, Vessel, that raised 140 million plus, that tried to get influencers to release their content on their platform first before other channels. Now, Spotify is a little bit of a different play, but just because you have original content, does that mean that behavior is automatically going to shift? Hopefully. In Spotify's case, I mean, Howard Stern is probably the best analogy closest to this that I'm sure Spotify is really following, in terms of what they did with Sirius XM and migrating that audience and building a substantial business. But Spotify is just realizing we need to be in the original IP business to have a shot. Now, I don't know if that means that the amount of money that they're paying is justified, but I can see where they're going, and I think it's probably the right decision to go in that direction, to maintain their hold and take their business to the next level.
Yeah. Great answer. Last couple of questions for you. So, Paul, it says, you seem to be speaking about written content, but short form video seems to be the way at the moment. Do you apply the same principles for video?
I'm not sure I was really talking about written content, so I don't know where that was coming from. But again, like, we look at what is the content that's going to engage and retain. Now, some people will go, oh, you can only do 30-second videos, or you need to do 3-minute videos or 5-minute videos or 10-minute videos. To me, it's really, what is the content saying? Because, maybe the video is only a matter of 30 seconds and you don't have more content than that. Sometimes, like, we have like Prince EA, who wrote the foreword for my book, he'll do a 7 or 8-minute video on Facebook or Instagram that will kill it. Joe Rogan will do it a 2.5-hour podcast. Yeah. So it really comes down to the quality of the content and how it's serving the viewer and the audience to dictate that, whether it's a visual medium like video or image, or a written medium like text content is. Does this, and a good analogy is, does this story I want to tell, or this piece of information, make more sense as an article or a book? Is you don't just jump to a book for the sake of jumping to a book. Some stories or things are meant to be an article instead of a book, and the same thing with the video. Some things are meant to be 30 seconds versus 2 hours, and just knowing that and knowing what you're trying to deliver for your audience. Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for that one. And we've got Fred says, do you believe social media advertising has now surpassed traditional methods of advertising?
I don't know the numbers, if that's what he's asking, but I would say in terms of overall effectiveness, In many ways, yes. In some ways, no. There's still a lot of value when you talk about traditional television, radio and print. However, the attribution that you can get from social media, if your transaction's happening online, in some cases you can track it offline, is far more superior in terms of seeing what's happening all the way through the life cycle of that ad and just that attribution window and the funnel that you take them through and all of that. So I think in many ways it has surpassed it, but I'm not going to sit here and say that there's no value in television, print, or radio. In some instances, I would say that you could probably get amazing deals on those forms of advertising now because of the fact that a lot of dollars have been pulled from it. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to your ability to track, your ability to test, and your ability to learn, to see which one is the best fit for your specific business, because each business is different. And each way that you reach the consumer can be different. And as long as it works for you and drives the ROI that you're looking for, that's really all that matters.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of conversations that I've had, and I guess this is a product of the pandemic, is, a lot of these big blue chip organizations that have, budgets for live events, is that they've still got the budget because tech is still selling a lot of software and hardware out there, but they've got to repurpose that budget. So they're looking at other channels. In light of that, for you, where do you see the immediate future for something like influencer marketing, for example?
From which perspective? Is somebody hiring an influencer or somebody being an influencer?
Yeah, I've had a few questions around that with regards to hiring an influencer. Interested to know, do you think people are still willing to put their dollars in that? And again, I know it comes down to specific businesses and specific markets, but do you see that waning at all, or do you see that growing at all?
I couldn't tell you of if more people are putting money into it. I would just, again, what we see is if you're intelligent about it and if you're testing and learning, influencer marketing can be a tremendous tool. But if you don't really do the due diligence, you could lose a ton of money, or it could be completely ineffective for you. I think influencer marketing is going to be around for the long term. There's going to continuously be an evolution to what it is and what it looks like. But I don't see it dramatically growing or declining in one way or another, at least over the next 12 months of what's going on. Because I think, and the reason I say that is marketers haven't really caught up to how to really track and attribute sales and revenue to influencers in a scalable way. I'm not saying that there's people that don't, like my friend that was in the 1 Million Followers book that's the chief growth officer for FabFitFun. They've mastered it. I mean, they tested over 10,000 influencers, and probably well over that at this point.
Wow.
And they've mastered it. So it really, I think that once the attribution becomes as clean and simple as like Facebook or Instagram ads, then I think you're going to really see that explosion. And it's getting there. Don't get me wrong. There's companies that are doing it, and there's companies that I work with where we do it. But I think that there's still some tools and some learning and education that needs to happen for influencer marketing to really break through to that next level, which I think ultimately it will. I don't know how long it's going to take to get there, but I think there will be a growth spurt in the future once some of these things get cleaned up.
Great, thank you, Brendan. And maybe quick last question, because I know you've got to go. Tony, with a limited budget, what would be the best strategy to use on social media advertising right now?
Well, it depends on the product. So for me, if you're dealing with a limited budget, what I would focus on is how do you generate that first sale? And if you generated that first sale, how do you turn that one sale into 5 sales or 10 sales? So, and then you can keep scaling. You can keep scaling it from there. So he says it, or this is a different person, says clothes.
Yeah, clothes, yeah. Oh, ed tech, education tech, so very different from clothes, but yeah.
Yeah, so to me, it's like, okay, well, how do we make that first sale? And what is the process to make that first sale? And also really knowing the numbers of your business, and this goes for clothing as well, is you've really got to sit down and say, okay, what am I charging for my product? What is my profit margin off of it? And based off my profit margin, what am I willing to spend to acquire that customer? In addition to, are there going to be subsequent purchases from that? Thus, we can look at the lifetime value. So once you have those numbers, you can say, okay, I'm willing to spend $50 to acquire a customer, and I project my lifetime value of that customer is going to be $150. Now you can go off and spend $50 on social advertising and see if you can make a sale for that. Or you can go for tech or even clothes. Can I find a distribution partner? Can I find a retail outlet? Can I find somebody that may promote it for free in exchange for free product or things of that nature? But first and foremost, you've got to understand the fundamental financial elements that drive the business, and then go off and test with limited budget in order to determine if you can make that financial model work.
Awesome. Really appreciate that. Last question goes, AJ. Do you recommend doing Instagram ads 2 or 3 times a week? And that's the clothing.
I need some more clarification on that.
Yeah.
Do you find that companies have reduced spending on advertising since the pandemic? Some have, some haven't. We've spent more during this time.
Yeah.
Because our product kind of leads to it.
Well, look, taken up a lot of your time already, Brendan. Now you got to go. So appreciate all the questions that have come in, everybody. Massively appreciated. Always a pleasure talking to you, Brendan. Easiest place, I'm assuming, is Amazon to find out more about Hook Point, how to stand out in a 3-second world.
I would go to, and I'll type it in the chat, Hook Point, or book.hookpoint.com, because if you get the book there, you'll get access to a free masterclass as well. Masterclass if you get it from there. Much better. Okay, even better value. Okay, well, look, thank you very much indeed. Thank you everybody for joining us. You can go to the virtual networking rooms after this if you carry on like to networking with each other. And then tomorrow I'm back. We're talking funding, we are talking crowdfunding, we're talking angel investing, and we are also talking VC investing as well. So we'll be back then. In the meantime, Brendan, thank you. Always a pleasure. Thank you for your time. Great connecting. Thank you. Bye-bye now.